Good afternoon if you're on the East Coast of the US, or good time of the day wherever you are joining us in the world. If you are looking for the Brandon Hall Group Growthspace PayPal webinar on strategies for focused and impactful learning, you are in the right place. My name is Matt Pittman. I will be your host for our time together this afternoon. As folks are joining us, do me the pleasure of finding that chat window that is enabled today in your Zoom window and let us know where you're joining us from. I happen to be, as I said, on the East Coast of the United States. I'm in sunny, windy, and really hot South Florida today. We're picking up some summer humidity uh, in this late spring. Hey, I see LA and Michigan, lots of East Coasters along with me. Very good. California, Tel Aviv, welcome. Madison, Wisconsin, Berlin, Boston, New Mexico, Denmark. Got some bucket list locations on this coming up in this chat list for me. Excellent. Very good. You guys passed your first test with flying colors. Thank you for that. Again, this is Strategies for Focused and Impactful Learning with Brandon Hall Group, Growthspace, and PayPal. My name is Matt Pittman. I'm a principal analyst with Brandon Hall Group, and I'll be your host for this afternoon's festivities. I am really excited to share the panel today with my two distinguished co-presenters. First off, I'm really glad to have Omer Glass, who is the co-founder and CEO of Growthspace, with us. How are you, Omer?
I'm good. Happy to be here.
And we are joined by Kendra Goldbass, Global Head of Learning and Development at PayPal. Welcome, Kendra.
Thanks, Matt. Good to see you, Omer.
It's great to have you both here this afternoon. And we do want to give a quick shout out and a thank you to Growthspace, our sponsor for today's event. Growthspace is a precision skill development platform designed to drive your business KPIs through personalized human-to-human talent development programs. With Growthspace, you can propel your business forward using expert-led programs tailored to your needs. The platform is engineered for comprehensive management of learning experiences, whether for individuals or teams, ensuring both efficiency and tangible impacts on your business. Growthspace offers the largest talent development data set worldwide, along with a network of over 2,000 global experts in more than 80 skills and 50 languages. This has enabled leading organizations like Siemens, Microsoft, EY, Deloitte, PayPal, and even the United States government to see significant improvements and business performance boosts. What makes Growthspace especially effective is its AI-driven expert matching system and a unique sprint model, which together ensure a match with the ideal expert for every individual or team. Growthspace is here to help you achieve your organization's highest potential. To learn more about Growthspace, you can visit them at growthspace.com, and we would really encourage you to do that. If this is your first time on a Brandon Hall Group webinar, or you're not familiar with the work that we do beyond the webinars, Brandon Hall Group is a research and analyst firm that works with organizations to improve your human capital management practice. We do this in a number of ways through membership programs for individual and enterprise organizations, preferred providers like Growthspace, as well as our well-known Excellence Awards program, which recognizes top organizations that successfully deploy programs in all HCM practice areas. And we're pleased that Growthspace and PayPal are award-winning organizations for us. A quick note about our certification programs. These are self-paced programs that enable you to join or your team to join, that are open for enrollment across the spectrum, including our Certified Learning Strategist program. You can visit certification.brandonhall.com to learn more about earning that industry designation. And quick note about Zoom. You guys have already found the chat feature, so you are more than halfway there. The Q&A panel will remain open throughout our session today. We will be primarily addressing questions towards the end of our time together, but feel free to submit your questions for the panel as we go through using that Q&A function. You can also interact with the host and panelists and your fellow learners through the chat feature as well. And with that, let's talk a little bit about why we're focusing, no pun intended, on the topic at hand today. Brandon Hall Group knows from our research that alignment between learning strategy and business goals is a high priority for investment in both time and resources for organizations. As we looked into 2024, we know that organizations are concerned about this, and we want to be focusing our time and our energy on the right things. We also know from learning benchmarking data that organizations, nearly 80% of organizations responding, have a documented learning strategy, and that 70% of organizations also have some level of learning committee or council or governance when it relates to that. Now, why do we care about that? We care about that because when there is learning governance and there's clear strategy to help with that decision-making process, we know that organizations are less likely to run into issues with effective measurement, less likely to have problems delivering personalized learning, less likely to run into issues with upskilling employees. And we all know as learning professionals that the demand will always outpace what we can focus on in a meaningful way. And so what we really want to dig into today is that decision-making process. How do we focus and learn and know what we want to prioritize? And so that is really what Omer and Kendra and I are going to talk about with you all this afternoon. So Kendra, Omer, what attracted us to this topic today?
I'm happy to start. First of all, it's just really great to be here. This is my first webinar, so hopefully everyone will take it easy on me. But one of the reasons I was excited to be here was because it was an opportunity to really share the partnership that we've generated over the last year and a half or so with Growthspace and what it's really meant to us here at PayPal and in the work that we're doing. So as Matt mentioned, I lead our global learning and development organization at the enterprise level here at PayPal. We have about 25,000 employees at PayPal in a variety of different business functions across many different job families. We are in financial services, but also a technology company. We have a very strong customer focus. So you can imagine there's a tremendous amount of diversity in the types of learners that we seek to support. But across all of that diversity, there are two things that we are really, really focused on. One of them is fostering a culture of learning at PayPal. So how can we create a learner experience that really delights the learner to want to engage, to want to find ways to continue to grow their career, their ability to be leaders. Ideally, we want all of that to happen here at PayPal, but I think we start by being committed to seeing that happen for the human. And then also to find ways for learning to happen in the flow of work, because we know that that's another way to ensure that that culture of learning really comes to life. And so I was excited to be here because it was a great way to really showcase in one of the vectors of our work, how that's happened and how it's really come to life in our new manager program, which I know we'll talk about in more depth, because it's where Omer and I have really spent time partnering and really showcasing meaningful impact for the business.
Awesome.
Excellent. Omer, what would you add? What's exciting to you about today's topic?
So I think I really like Kendra's approach in general. And when they approached us and basically we started the partnership, I really liked their focus, right? And the precision and basically the intentional approach to learning and development. And I see a lot of organizations, and we work with a lot of Fortune 500. And a lot of times you see organizations struggling with just choosing the population that they want to work with, and choosing what exactly they want to work with, and what is the desired impact. And I think this intentional approach that Kendra and PayPal took is really inspiring and can add a lot of value to a lot of organizations, because I really think it's like sometimes organizations get it wrong. And I think it's just one model that I personally find really efficient. And this is part of, like we talked about, we had great results. So I will give you the bottom line. And I think 95% of the managers, of the participants in PayPal's programs, Growthspace programs, testify that we really we really impacted their day-to-day work and their KPIs, which is phenomenal. I don't think a lot of learning and development programs do that. Now, I think it's both that, we have a great product, but more than that is, how do you apply them? And how do you market it internally and connect it to your KPIs? So I think it's a great case study.
Absolutely. So Kendra, let's come back to that, because I love what you said about fostering that culture of learning as a place to start. So what other, how did you land on that? And sort of what are the foundational principles that guide your approach, at the macro level, I guess, for lack of a different way to say that, at PayPal for learning and development?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, that really does drive, it's sort of the nirvana, if you will, of everything that we do. But you then have to get tactical and practical. Okay, well, what does that mean? How are you touching that notion of culture of learning? Who are you touching? And to Omer's point, I think, where and how do you decide to focus? I've been in seat for about 2.5 years. And when I came to PayPal, there was a tremendous amount of great work happening in a very distributed way across the business. And one of the elements of my remit was to really bring as much of that as possible together in a concentrated way that would ensure we were creating the highest value of impact across the company. And so, as most of us on this call, I'm sure, do, when you're tasked with developing a new strategy, you start listening, right? And so we spent a lot of time listening to the business, listening to employees, really trying to understand where were places where we could create tactical and practical impact from the start. And what that resulted for us in is a couple of different things, but as relates to our partnership with Omer, it really came down to both, how do you foster that sense that learning is a component of development and growth, and what is important for you to be successful at PayPal, with big inflection points or moments that matter. And for us in the program in particular that we do, what we do with Omar's team, what it really came down to is there's a really important moment that matters for many, many people across the business. And that is that moment when you step into the role of leading others. And so oftentimes, and again, I don't think this is unique to PayPal, when people enter into that position, it is generally because they've been high performing in some way. They've demonstrated great skill in what they know and how they're able to accomplish a whole host of tasks. But it might not be because they actually have practice or experience in that position of leading others in two very important ways. Either they may not have the skills around what does it mean to be a leader and motivate not just your own work, but the work of others. How do I actually think about work stream distribution in ways that, again, is not just for how I use my time, but how I use the time of others, how I make sure I upward communicate and manage all of those pieces. Those just may not be in the toolkit. And how do you create that set of expectations and an understanding? But what we also found were a lot of folks were going into these people leader roles really unequipped with just the understanding of the the mechanics, right? How do I enter someone's feedback into Workday? Very simple things, right? That again, if you haven't been in that position, you may not just have had the exposure to it. So we started from a very kind of clear base of how do you take that moment that matters when you know a learner is going to be most hungry, right? To do well, to be equipped, to deliver. And how do we couple that with an effective learning experience that really does try to cover the bases on both sides? Both how do you develop strong skills of leadership, but how do you marry that also with tactical, day-to-day practical applications of what it means to be a people leader here in our environment?
Right.
Matt, I feel like you're going to ask me something.
And just from a follow-up perspective, how did we land on this is the moment and this is the population
Yeah,
that
for sure.
we want to focus on for now? Because I'm sure there were many of those moments that you could have landed on. So how did we land here?
Yeah, absolutely. There were many, and there are many. So I think the other thing is it's not to suggest that somehow our entire learning and development strategy rests exclusively with our people leaders by any stretch of the imagination. And if you spend time with our team, you'd know that we have, we're sort of like an idea workshop at all times, right? There's so many different things that we want to be doing, but it really came down to prioritizing what was meeting the moment of the need of the business. And so what we on that listening tour and being able to look at the data very quickly realized is there were a number of inefficiencies happening for how we frankly supported our customers, because at the end of the day, if we're working customer back, right, we need our organizations to be able to deliver for customers. And there were too many friction points within our management of teams, too many friction points across the board. And so how could we as a learning and development team, everyone has a role to play, right? When you're talking about how to impact growth, impact strategy, drive for customers, but what's the role we could play as a learning and development team to address that friction? And that's where we landed on the notion of how do we equip, and I'll come back to another part of your question, how do we equip managers more effectively than we did before? Now, you might also be saying, well, gosh, not every manager is a new manager, right? So there's lots of people who've been in role a long time, and how do you make sure and that's absolutely a very fair question, and one that we're actually actively working on now. But in the spirit of prioritization and recognizing that, again, what we're trying to do is grab a learner when they're most hungry, most engaged, most in need, we settled on step one for us being the new manager. That's going to be the most receptive, the most willing, if you will, partner in the learning experience. And we want to establish sort of a framework of expectations with that population. And so that's where we started. What it's really helped us to do is twofold, and Omar can speak to this too, because we'll talk a bit about what are the components of the experience that I think has been so lasting and impactful. But what it's allowed us to do is two things. And I'll admit, I probably didn't appreciate the value of the second one as much as it's come to life. But one, it's established, again, that set of expectations for new leaders that doesn't go away, right? That now has become part of the lexicon of what they believe leadership to be as a manager at PayPal, right? And they're going to carry that upward and downward in their journey. What I don't think I appreciated as much, and Omar touched on this, is how much it would impact their managers in seeing the value of putting that baseline of learning experience into play. And so we've had the benefit of not only a set of managers who are better equipped, who are more confident in their work, who are creating better experiences for their employees, but we now have an evangelizing set of senior leaders who understand that this is an important thing to invest in, that it's worth the time, effort, and resource because of all the dividends that it pays later. And again, sometimes you have the best strategy in the world and you've really researched it, but you don't always know what these great knock-on effects are going to be going forward. And that's been one that really the partnership with Growthspace has allowed us to see in ways we maybe wouldn't have seen so quickly without using a lot of their tools and feedback.
Very good. So I'm struck by the balance that that this and I've spent time talking with both of you, so I've heard about a lot more about the program, the specific program, the manager's transition program. How did you arrive on that a balance between meeting the needs of those learners in that moment that matters for them and the broader need of the business to just improve
Yeah.
how our managers show up?
Sure. Well, this is kind of the touching on the flow of work, having learning exist in the flow of work, and where the partnership with Growthspace really comes into play. So for everyone on the call, our program works with two different components. One is new managers, when they are promoted or come into role, they receive an invitation to participate in our program. We make it very flexible for them. So it's not you must start on Tuesday, but it's rather we have a series of cohorts that happen throughout the year, and we encourage them to enroll at a time when they can focus within their initial 6 months. So we're trying to meet them in the moment that matters, but also recognize that if we create too small of a window, we really do potentially lose a lot of learners who are not able to engage. The program then consists of 6 weeks of engaged virtual classroom instruction on both those leadership skills I mentioned, but also the practical, tactical tools of what it means to support large groups of individuals through performance management, through feedback tools, through all of the different resources that are available to leaders. Along the way, they get to spend time in cohort teams, they get exposure and experience with other leaders across the business. They do a whole bunch of practical application, as you'd expect in many learning programs. But then at the end of that 6 weeks, instead of sending them on their way and saying, good luck, we hope that you do well in your role, and obviously we do, that's when Growthspace comes into play. And so the learner doesn't sort of come out of the experience expected to own it all themselves and hold on to their notebooks, but actually they get paired with an expert who then helps them really hone in on the 1 or 2 things from that learning journey that they really want to see converted into impact in their particular team. And that partnership with the expert is driven by the individual, but includes engagement with their direct manager. So it is a collaborative kind of alignment on what matters from everything that I've just learned in the flow of the work that I'm engaged in, and ensuring that these become skills and modes of operation and ways of working that really do stick and apply to my day-to-day. And I think that very quick shift from classroom, again, in quotes, experience to the partnership with a Growthspace expert to see that work really come to life is one of the reasons why I think the program has really taken off in the way that it has, and has allowed for us to see so many indicators of impact.
And so it sounds like that being able to really come alongside these managers past the more formal aspect of the learning and into now I'm back in my real world, and maybe I don't understand this as well as
That's
I
right.
thought I did. And talk a little. Can either of you talk a little bit more about how Growthspace shows up in that gap to really drive that skills development home?
Yeah, do you want to
To
take
the
that
point
one
earlier.
over?
Of course. So I think the unique thing about the situation that Kendra is describing is that they have a lot of new managers, and all of them are going through like a PayPal's core training, which is great. It creates alignment, experiences, like a lot of things that they design. But every manager is different, and every manager has a different skill gap, and all of them are struggling. I remember myself, the first time I managed someone, it's a whole new ballpark than being an individual contributor. So this is one of the hardest slips to do, because usually you're getting promoted because you're a great individual contributor, but then it doesn't necessarily say that you're a great manager. And then what you're trying to do is sometimes, being very centralized and not like delegating. So this is a challenge. Like, you need to work on your delegation. Maybe sometimes you're a great individual contributor, but you don't have a lot of gravitas or leadership. You're not confident enough. You don't know how to speak up. a totally different skill set. Maybe you work in sales and there are sales related managers techniques that you need to learn. So you need to work with someone who's been through sales. So this is the precision point, and this is where basically Growthspace joins PayPal. Because the way PayPal work with us is it's a 5-session sprint, 5 1-hour sprints over the course of approximately 2 months. And it's objective driven and skill driven. So every manager will align with their direct manager before the sprint, and taking into consideration everything they learned in the core training Kendra described. And then they will hone in a specific objective, like a business-related KPI and a very specific skill that they need to work on. Then they will be matched with an expert who is expert in the skill. So it's not a generalist. Think of a generalist versus a specialist. It's a specialist. It's like instead of going to your GP, you're going to your eye doctor, for example, or something like that. So you're basically matched with someone who understands the very specific skill you need to work on, whether it's negotiation or leadership or management or sales, and someone who also shares your background. So they come from tech. They need to work with people who understand tech. And not only that, if you come from sales, you want to be matched with people who have sales background. So that's the unique approach. And basically, if you're matched with someone who can teach you something very, very precise, then also we see impact. And the 5-session sprint is very efficient because it's not an ongoing thing you do. Now it's an opportunity to work on something very specific with a very clear beginning, a clear end. So it's over after 2 months, and after 2 months, you see the results.
I'd love to add something to that too, if I could, Matt, because so 2 things I would note here. One is, I think we did all the right work to make a decision around this as a starting point in our strategy. As I mentioned, it is surely not an ending point, and we're continuing to roll out more and more work that is focused on different populations, using that same methodology of what matters to the business, what matters to our customers ultimately in the end, and how are we preparing employees to be successful. But the thing that I think is really interesting about this kind of end of classroom time partnership is we can have all of the best ideas and intentions around what's important for setting expectations for people leadership at PayPal. And I think we do a really good job of articulating that over those 6 weeks. But then there is the individual's understanding of their development needs, where their skill deficiencies lie, whatever performance feedback they've received over time as they're prepared for or gotten into this role. And that ability, I think, to partner one-on-one with someone and be very personally prescriptive, I think is just a huge retention opportunity in terms of retention of learning. That I don't want to take away anything from the content of the work we do for the first 6 weeks, but I just don't think it's, unless you're in some tutoring environment and you're in a one-on-one and we're teaching everyone uniquely, you just can't get it in the same way. And I think what you have there then is really strong intention from the individual that's motivating them in a very different way, right? Because it's sort of like they come into our program, it's called MAPS. They come into MAPS very excited about what it means to be a people leader, but they join the Growthspace partnership saying, okay, what is it about me that I really want to see happen differently? How am I going to make that shift, that mindset shift, and that skill shift? And the last thing I'll say is to Omar's point, the time horizon. I was skeptical a little bit about this myself. Like, if we make it too short, what if people get busy and we won't get the kind of engagement? But I actually think it works in the reverse. I think people are, the scarcity factor of I got to get this in, it's actually really helping me and only me, and I need to move quickly to take advantage of it. I actually think really works to our advantage too. And that's not something that I would have known. And so again, back to why we're all here. Sometimes I think strategy is about getting going, attempting focus, driving to a goal, but it's also about learning something new along the way and then bringing that into play for how you go forward, right? That agility to learn from what you've done, I think is a really critical part of what we've gotten out of this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what I love as I'm listening to this story is the way it reinforces how corporate learning has evolved, right? Because e-learning was going to be the savior of all. And for a while, I think it did because it was such a massive leap forward in capability and applicability. But what we've learned over time is the more targeted that is, the more specific, the more personal it is to me and where I live as the individual learner, the more likely it is that I will engage with it, the more impactful and effective it becomes over time. And the more ultimately we're actually moving the needle on performance, which at the end of the day is what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
I'm curious, Kendra, if you can talk a little bit. You talked about how the leaders of the leaders became evangelizers for this program, and it was, I've been in organizations where I built programs that, we're asking leaders to support, but it wasn't the program they went through, or they never went through a program because it didn't exist. And I'm curious what you did to set the stage for building that excitement and involvement from the direct managers.
Yeah.
Because we know that that's a critical component to any, skill development initiative.
Sure. Two elements to it. One is that built-in partnership that Growthspace requires, right? So you can't just join in with your expert unless you have your direct manager's engagement in what it is that you're focused on. So right there, you're getting them invested, not just in the fact that Susie, is taking this new manager program, but actually now I've got to be paying attention to what it is that she thinks she values out of this experience, and watching and tracking the impact of her building a particular set of skills over the 2 months that follow, right? So there's, I think, that accountability component, right, that just comes into play through the platform that Growthspace provides, and the kind of open measurement and engagement that those tools create for everyone, for us as the program leaders, but also for the individual as they're tracking their own commitments and actions, and then how their managers can see that. So I think that probably has been one of the most exciting things about how you sort of bring in an expert partner. So both there are experts at Growthspace, but I think we realized we needed an expert partner who had that kind of platform and resource and support that we just don't have internally, right? And we're all facing this all the time. What's the buy, build relationship when you're both starting something, but also as you continue to evolve it? And I think for us, there's no doubt that we own the importance of what are leadership expectations at PayPal, right? What do we value in leaders? What do we want to see happen? What does our business need? That has to be something that we grow internally, that we hold dear, and that we drive forward. But how those skills are developed for employees, what techniques and tools are used to get the most out of a learning experience, we're not always going to be at the cutting edge of that, right? We're probably not, that's not our core expertise as a company. It's not where, so how do we make sure that we've got the right relationships, the right partnerships? I think is just a really important example for me of why this has worked so very well. And it has allowed us to have knock-on positive impacts, like directors being direct managers being engaged in a way that I don't know that we would have been able to be as successful in on our own. So that's maybe one way of tackling that. I don't know, Omar, if you would add anything else about the way in which the tool works that draws out the manager engagement as well.
So I think the manager engagement is crucial for the success, because again, it's not, you're not doing this program in a void, right? It's like you said, in the flow of work. In the flow of work, you work with your manager. And actually, the thing I really like about the manager involvement is that it becomes a tool for the manager, not only for the participant. Because the manager, as a manager, you manage people. There are things you think your employees are amazing at, and there are places to growth. And sometimes you're frustrated about the specific things and specific behaviors. And sometimes you don't have the time, or like you don't know how to help them to be better at something very specific. So when you think about it, kind of like, okay, you give them feedback, right? And you're doing performance evaluation, but then what? And then when you give a feedback and say, hey, you know what? I can match you with an expert. You really need to work on your negotiation skills or on your pitch, or just, gravitas, like talk more in meetings. I think and then here, take an expert, take 5 sessions with an expert, and let's set KPIs together, and then let's see the progress you're making. You're also helping them and basically serving them and serving yourself, because this is connected to your KPIs as a manager.
Yeah. And so let's talk a little bit about the impact of this program, and sort of where are you on the journey now? So you talked about how we determined this was the population we needed, what we wanted to do with that moment for them, and the tactics a little bit. But let's talk about what has that meant for PayPal.
Yeah, sure. So we launched the program just last year. This is our second, and in fact, this will be our true first full year, because we really did not open up enrollment until April of last year. So it'll be exciting to see results by the end of 2024. But nevertheless, again, we are targeting folks who are new to role, so newly promoted and newly hired, and at a very specific level within the business too, I should say. So really looking at folks in the kind of mid-level management, I guess, for a common term across all. We've had so far since April of last year, almost 600 people participate in the program. We were targeting actually only having about 400 folks last year, just based on promotion, data that we have, and exceeded our expectations in that enrollment. So I think it just sort of speaks to the hunger for this. That's not where we started, by the way, too. So it wasn't like, cohort number 1 was exploding. We had to build the reputation and the impact story. But we've done that in a way where I think now, right, we actually, we delayed some of our cohort announcements at the top of 2024 for some unrelated reasons. But my program managers had folks reaching out like, how come I'm not seeing, the enrollment opportunity, and where is the chance for, and can I get on a wait list, even though we didn't really have one. But I think it was really speaking to the fact that it was quickly becoming something that people felt like was part of the DNA of what it meant to get ready for, or to be sort of your package of promotional experience. So the engagement has been really high. The practical, I think, recognition of why it matters for new leaders has also been really high. Our NPS has been quite incredible. But also what we're seeing, and obviously it's early days, so again, I don't want to overstate, but what we're really starting to track now too, and I know Omar will talk more about the in data, or sort of in experience data, so I'll let him do that. But the things that we're getting excited about too are looking at retention, and soon we hope to be looking also at advancement, right? So how can we track our MAPS participants to see whether or not these are folks who are fast tracking through the manager experience because of this kind of support that they've received on the front end. But our attrition data, our retention data is already looking quite strong relative to those who didn't have this kind of experience in their first year. So that gets us really excited. And then Omar can speak to all, sort of some of the data we're seeing in the platform that also gives us a lot of confidence about this being the right approach.
Yeah, I will add to that. First of all, I think the most important metrics are the metrics that you care about, right? So the platform also has measure, like, its own thing, but the bottom line is in everything, in every talent development program, it's all about your metrics, your organization metrics, because eventually you're coming to the CEO of PayPal, hey, this is what we did, and this is what happened. And if we can show like a successful promotion, like high rates of promotion, if we can show lower rates of like a volunteer attrition, it's great, right? And it pays off. I think On top of that, basically what we do in our platform and the metric that we're like mostly proud of. First of all, it's very important that the participants are having great experience, very high scores, which is great. But I think what's really off the charts, again, with your specific case at PayPal, is what the managers are saying. So before, when the program starts, again, as I said, every manager defines a KPI and an objective to the program. And like usually it's also connected to actual business metric that they're trying to drive. And then in the end, we come back and ask them, hey, this is what you said in the beginning. How much impact do you see? So think about 95% of the managers saying that we see a significant improvement in the objective that we define. So I think then basically what you do is not only you made people better and you have an objective point of view of their managers, not only the participants, because usually self-reporting tends to be biased, but the managers didn't meet the expert, right? They didn't use the platform. They just like they're seeing their people. And I think this is extremely powerful. And on top of that, it builds like learning of like culture of learning in the organization. So it becomes something that's important for the managers. And I think this is a very important byproduct because a learning organization is a good organization.
Now, there's two other things that we're putting a lot of focus on in this year, again, now that we'll have a full year of data to observe. And so I just share this in case these are indicators that others or metrics that others value. But one is we will have our first Engage survey in just a couple of weeks, where we've been able to, we can't take all credit for this from learning, but we're thrilled that it's happening, where there's actually been several new questions added about your experience with your direct manager / your leader, in terms of whether or not you feel that they are driving a good experience, creating clear objectives, a whole host of things. Our ability to then take that insight specifically around folks who've participated in MAPS is going to be huge, right? And so to be able to, anonymously, of course, but to look and see how has the MAPS population fared on some of these questions, not just about from their manager, because I think to Omar's part, we're getting a lot of good insight in the program from that, but actually to the folks who are reporting to them, who ultimately this was all about, right? Was making sure that they were having better experiences and getting closer to business impact. And so being able to isolate that out and really get a look at that data is going to be super, super exciting for us. We're also starting to track the relationship to these learners to future learning too, right? Remember, our big mission is fostering that culture of learning. So being able to tie the experience of this group to say, how much ongoing engagement are they having with learning opportunities? Again, the Growthspace piece being time bound, but many of our other resources are not. You alluded to when we all thought that e-learning was going to solve everything. I call e-learning a yes and experience, right? Yes, we need it, but it and has to be aligned to other things. And so in the experience, folks complete their 6 weeks, they have their opportunity with Growthspace, but then they stay part of our MAPS community. We host a SharePoint with lots of ongoing resources for them. Some of it is just new and different things that are happening in the business, but there's also resources related to ongoing development as a people leader. And so being able to watch that metric of engagement over this year too has also been very helpful for us, because ultimately we hope that touching learners in these moments that matter don't end in that moment, but actually support their ongoing lifelong learner experiences.
I think that's the ideal state that we want to be working towards. So before we transition to a couple of questions that have come in from the audience, I also wanted to ask you, Kendra and Omar both, to weigh in on, we undoubtedly have learning leaders, sorry, picture over here, camera over here. Let's try that again. We undoubtedly have learning leaders and learning pros in this call who are hearing this story, who are getting energized and inspired by the steps that you went through, but are on the very front end of their own journeys. So what is your best advice for someone who's listening to this and saying, I want to build towards this type of success in my own learning journey for my organization? Where do I start? What's your best advice for those folks?
Amar, do you want to go first?
Of course. So I think it doesn't matter like where you are, if you're leading learning and development or you just started. Eventually, it's about the impact you create. And I think I will quote one of my customers, Sarah Tilley, who leads learning and development and talent acquisition at ServiceNow. Like people will not remember how much you paid. People will remember the impact you created, right? So again, put aside the cost and but just the concept of aim for the impact, aim for big things that will move the needle, even for a few people, but like aim for a really, really high impact for like even a limited population, because this is what will eventually create the difference, and this is how people will remember you and your work. So I think it's just focus on the things that people really need and try to connect solutions, very, very impactful solutions, to the specific things that people need.
Excellent. And Kendra?
I would echo that. Yeah. I think for so many of us in our organizations today, there's a critical role that we play in translating the importance of talent development to business outcome, right? And that in order to have impact and success and results that you seek as an organization, as a business, your talent has to be part of that equation. So I think that's the kind of frontline piece I would say is critical to get started on and to make sure that your organization understands. And if you have to support that with negative data sometimes, like where you see a business impact not being achieved and can tie that very obviously to a lack of talent readiness, right? I think not that I love telling bad stories, but sometimes a negative story really does bring home the point. But that's a place to start. And then to Omar's point, even if you have to pick a small population, right? I'm talking about a program that's touched, 600 people. We're not talking about, right, thousands yet, right?
Right.
But create excellence from the beginning. Create an expectation of excellence and impact. Because I do think, I talk to my team a lot about the importance of building political capital, right? And what that is in this space, I think, is being able to point to a result that has a direct correlation to something that has mattered for the business, even again, if it's in small ways, because you got to start somewhere. You just got to start somewhere.
Absolutely.
And sometimes it's too much. It's too much to ask of the business to do it at scale. Fine. Yeah. We're going to do it small. We're going to get started, and we're going to do it in a way that showcases results that will leave you hungry for more. And so that's Absolutely. What we tried to do here.
And the power of starting from that point of where can we help the business move the needle on what it needs to move the needle on. And I apologize because I just said the business like it's some other thing, but learning is in the business. We are the business. We are part of the business, right? So starting from that place of how am I going to help the company I work for achieve its results will always lead to better learning outcomes down the road. The road. So we're gonna I want to pull in a couple. We've had a handful of questions come in, and please, by all means, feel free to continue to submit those. But I also want to remind folks, if you did register ahead of time for today's event, there is a drawing coming up at the very last couple of minutes for a $100 Amazon gift card raffle giveaway. So you have to be present to win. So hopefully you'll be here when Ivy reads out your name in a few minutes. So I want to jump first to Roddy's question about this is more specific to the Growthspace growth space component of the program and the experts. Who are these people? Are they internal to PayPal or are they external experts, and where do they come from? So Omer or Kendra, whichever of you wants to take that.
Sure, I'll take that. So Growthspace offers basically, so as Kendra said, it's a platform that helps you run talent development programs. And on top of like the management aspect, like, engaging the direct managers, the participants, like a very big skill taxonomy of over 1,100 skills that you need to choose from, which is the database, the ratings of the experts. So we have over 2,800 experts from over 65 countries globally. And each one of the experts is tagged in a very specific area of expertise. It ranges from leadership to communications to management to storytelling and negotiation, or very function specific things like sales, marketing, HR. So think about a lot of different skill sets. And the nice thing about it, each expert needs to focus on up to 2 out of over 90 different skill sets. So it's basically like a system of expertise. And the more people, like, PayPal contributed to us a lot of data points about the proficiency of the experts in a very specific skill that they're working on. So the more data we have on the platform basically becomes better. So the experts are usually learning and development practitioners. Think of the people providing management workshops, like sales training, sometimes leadership coaching, or some of them are just functional leaders, like CROs, CTOs in other companies, but each one specializes on something very specific and shares very specific background and industry.
Perfect. And then Kendra, there's a couple of questions that are sort of aligned together. It's a little more on the practical side relative to the match program around making sure how leaders start, when leaders start. Is it a mandatory thing that they sign up within the 6-month window, or what are the things that you're doing to make sure people actually do take advantage of an enrollment? Obviously on the front end, because now you're at the point where people are hungry for it. But how did you create that hunger, I guess, is the question.
Yeah. And that's an evergreen battle, right? Of staying relevant and important to an environment that is under a lot of pressure, we've actually gone through a tremendous amount of leadership change in the last couple of months as well. And so keeping focus is hard. Couple of things that we have learned to do. We are not an environment, unfortunately, from my perspective, that has real mandated learning of any kind aside from compliance. And in fact, culturally, the notion of you must really doesn't go over well. So we tested early on the idea that we would make this mandatory and got a lot of not great reactions. So what we pivoted to instead was much more of a kind of bestowing an honor kind of experience with the learner. And so now we do an automated but personalized invitation, if you will, for anyone who's recently promoted, because we know at that time there's excitement, there's enthusiasm, and a little bit of fear, right? When you've just been given this new job, and what does it mean? And so we try to really lean into that. So the individual and their manager both get a communication that says, we're excited for them. Congratulations on the promotion. And by the way, we invite you to roll. We invite you. And I think that's the other thing, because it is an invitation into a new club in a sense. We invite you to join this important opportunity to be the best leader that you can be at PayPal. We are not getting it all the way right in terms of timing, of course, by giving them a 6-month window. I know for certain we are losing some talent to that window, right? Because it's 4 months in, I've already been drinking from the fire hose. The notion that I'm going to do this is, past me or what have you. So there's some thinking that we're doing around, do we tighten that up? Do we try to kind of, do more follow-up to get them into certain cohorts? I don't have a good answer yet on where we'll land there, but I know that there's probably some more precision that could come into that approach. But we really are trying to make it something that is much more of an honor and much more of an opportunity rather than something that feels remedial in any way, because we're finding that, again, is a lot more effective for that fostering a culture of engagement and lifelong learning. I want to also just say something building on the question you had for Omar around the experts. I think for us, there is real excitement in working with someone who's not in the PayPal environment. And that doesn't take away from great leadership and great insight from within the business. But I think the expansion of the network, the seeing things from a different lens, in the little bit of kind of one-on-one conversations I've had with folks who've completed the program, that really stands out for them. So I think, not being afraid of recognizing that there's value in all kinds of ways of approaching problems, just as long as you're being really clear on your internal expectations, is a great add-on to an experience like this.
Yeah, absolutely. So final question around the focus. So is the focus on more soft skills development, or are there options for learning and development in an area of expertise? And I know, Kendra, you mentioned the content on the front end is that mix of both. But then when the handoff to Growthspace comes, it's what's important to me as the learner. What category does that fall in, I guess?
Yeah, I think that's a little more dealer's choice for all the right reasons. And so one of the really great things about Omar's platform being so diverse and with so many options for expertise is that we're not restricting the learner to the 6 modules that we just spent time on, right? Ideally, you want to see them, marrying the two. And I think ultimately most folks are doing that because they recognize these are the things they need to be successful at. But I think there's a lot of value and power in saying to someone, this is about you learning and getting better, right? Partnering with your manager on what that looks like. But we're really creating kind of the world is your oyster moment for these, this sprint. So take advantage of it. And being able to do that in a really wide open way, I think is quite powerful.
Excellent. Well, I am so very grateful for the time with both Kendra and Omar today. This has been a fascinating conversation. And there's a second part to that question about the mandatory thing that we could unpack for another hour. So maybe we'll come back and do that as a session unto itself, all about that learning taking away from productive time and all of that. But I know from experience and personal belief that needs its own session. So thank you both for your time. I'm going to bring on my colleague, Ivy Etchison, who is going to announce our raffle winner.
Yes, thank you, Matt, and thank you, everyone. So before we wrap up today, I would like to announce the lucky winner of our raffle. Congratulations to Abby Pinto on winning today's prize, a $100 Amazon gift card. We will send you an e-card shortly to celebrate your win. Matt, back over to you.
Awesome. Congratulations, Abby. And thank you for joining us today for this great conversation. There will be a recording available as well as a hard copy of the slides that we did share during the session. All of that will be emailed to participants within the next few hours, once all the technical things happen on the back end that need to happen. And we really encourage you to check out our friends at Growthspace and learn more about the ways that we can help you achieve your goals at Brandon Hall Group. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Omar.
Thank you.